Hey guys, this is Mr. Breen, and in this video I'll be talking about comparative advantage. And I'm going to be doing so by giving you an example. Let's say that there are two people stranded on a desert island, or they could just be the last remaining people in humanity, whatever. They're the only people we need to worry about, and their names are Willow, this is the early long-haired Willow, and Xander. Now they're lucky on their desert island, or end of humanity or whatever. They have some fresh water and they have some shelter and they have enough clothes and all that stuff. All they have to worry about is gathering food, but that's a pretty big worry. And when they're gathering food, they have a couple options. They can either get fish, they can go fishing, or they can look for coconuts. Okay, let's say further that in one day, Xander could get 4 fish. If he spent the whole day on fish, he could get 4 fish, and he could get 10 coconuts if he spent the whole day getting coconuts. Notice that his opportunity cost for 10 coconuts is 4 fish, and his opportunity cost for 4 fish is 10 coconuts. You can't do both of these, because if you spend the whole day fishing, you can't spend any of the day gathering coconuts. He could do some mix. He could do 2 fish. He could spend half the day fishing and half the day getting coconuts, in which case he'll get 5 of those. Now Willow, on the other hand, if she spends the whole day fishing, she can get 8 fish, and if she spends the whole day getting coconuts, she can get 8 coconuts. Now she can do a mix too. She could spend half the day fishing and get 4 fish, or she could spend half the day getting coconuts and get, 4 coconuts. Now let's say that they don't work together at all. They just do their own thing. So Xander, they like to have a balanced diet. So Xander will have 2 fish and 5 coconuts. He'll spend half his time on fish and half his time on coconuts. So that's his per day. He'll have 2 fish and 5 coconuts, and Willow will have 4 fish and 4 coconuts. But Willow points out they can actually do better. What if Willow focuses on fish and Xander focuses on coconuts? Well, in that case, and then they can trade. So in that case, if Xander keeps half his coconuts, he'll still have 5 of those, but he'll have 4 fish if Willow trades him half of her fish, and Willow will still have 4 fish, but she'll actually end up with 5 coconuts. Now it's clear in this example that they shouldn't work on their own, they should specialize and then trade with each other. In this example, that's pretty easy to see because Willow clearly has an absolute advantage in fish. She can collect 8 per day, whereas Xander, if he spends the whole day on it, still can only get 4. And in the other thing that they get, coconuts, Xander has the absolute advantage. If it were just a race to see who could collect the most coconuts per day, he would clearly win by 10 to 8. Now, strangely enough, that's not the reason why they should trade, actually. The reason why they should trade is because they have comparative advantages in different things. And the comparative advantage is who can produce something with the lowest opportunity cost. So for Xander, what's his opportunity cost for a coconut? Well, he gets 10 coconuts or he gets 4 fish. So for every coconut, what is X here? For every coconut, he misses out on 0.4 fish. That's his opportunity cost, 0.4 fish per coconut. For Willow, so let's put that right there, 0.4, that's his opportunity cost. For Willow, she is an 8 to 8, and therefore 1 to 1. So her opportunity cost per coconut is 1 fish. In other words, it's much costlier for Willow to collect coconuts than it is for Xander. She misses out on more fish than Xander will. Let's look at fish and who has the comparative advantage there. Well, Willow is at 1 to 1. So in other words, 1 fish, 1 coconut. So for every fish, she has to spend 1 coconut. 1 is her opportunity cost. For Xander, for every fish, okay, he gives up 4 coconuts, and so for every 1 fish, he gives up 2.5 coconuts, 2.5. So Willow actually has the comparative advantage, I'll circle comparative advantage in blue, because it's lower. Her opportunity cost is lower, and Xander has it in coconuts. His opportunity cost per coconut is lower. Okay, that was a pretty easy example because it was pretty obvious who should produce what, but let's give you a situation where it's not quite as obvious. In this new situation, everybody can produce exactly what they were able to produce before, except that Willow is much better at coconuts than she used to be. Okay, let's say she gets better. She acquires some human capital. Now she's better. She has an absolute advantage over Xander in fish. She has an absolute advantage in fish, and she has an absolute advantage in coconuts. Now, Xander gets a little worried because he sees the situation and thinks, well, she's not going to trade with me anymore. What's going to happen? My supply of fish is going to go down the drain. But Willow, being wise, knows that it's actually comparative advantage you should really worry about and not absolute advantage. Well, using the same kind of math we came up with before, Xander's trade-offs haven't changed. His opportunity cost per coconut is 0.4 fish, and his opportunity cost per fish is 2.5 coconuts. For Willow, her opportunity cost per fish is now 2 coconuts, and her opportunity cost per coconut is now 0.5 fish, using the same kind of math that we used before. Now, still, Xander has the comparative advantage in coconuts. Comparative advantage. Okay, because 0.4, his cost per coconut, is lower than Willow's cost per coconut still. It still costs her half a fish to gather each coconut, and it only costs Xander 0.4. Okay, and for fish, Willow still has the comparative advantage here, because 2 coconuts is a lower cost per fish than 2.5 coconuts per fish. Now the question is, why does this work? Well, anytime he wants, Xander can spend 2.5 coconuts to get 1 fish just by doing it himself. He's only willing to trade if he can get a fish for less than 2.5 coconuts. Willow, on the other hand, anytime she wants, can get a fish, and it's only going to cost her 2 coconuts, and she's willing to trade a fish for coconuts if she can get more than 2 coconuts per fish. Well, it seems like there's some room for negotiation there. As long as they can settle on a price of 1 fish for somewhere between 2 and 2.5 coconuts, they can come to an agreement that makes them both better off. By taking advantage of specialization in what they have a comparative advantage in, they can both make themselves better off through trade. Alright, so if you don't believe me, let me show you. They're both better off with trade, even though Willow can do everything better than Xander can do them. So Xander's going to specialize in coconuts and Willow in fish, because that's where they have their comparative advantage. So assuming they do that, and they trade at somewhere between 1 and 2. Let's see, 1 to 2 and 1 to 2.5. They're not going to trade at either of those because they could do just as well on their own, but somewhere in between they'll do that trade. So 1 fish for every 2.25 coconuts. So let's say that Willow makes her 8 coconuts and she trades 2 over. So she's left off with 6 and Xander has 2 coconuts. Okay, and they trade 2 coconuts for 4.5. 2 fish for 4.5 coconuts. So Willow now has 4.5 coconuts, and Xander has 5.5 coconuts, and that's with trade. But how well could they do without trade? Well, without trade, if Xander wanted 2 fish, we'll put it in black. If Xander wanted 2 fish, he's spending half his time on fish and half his time on coconuts, and if he spends half his time on coconuts, he gets only 5 of them. And Willow, so we'd expect him to be worse off without trade since Willow does everything better, but what about Willow? So if Willow wants 6 fish otherwise, she's going to spend 3/4 of her time on fish, okay, since 6 is 3/4 of 8, and that means she spends 1/4 of her time gathering coconuts, and therefore she can only get a maximum of 4. Look at that. She's worse off by half of a coconut if she doesn't trade with Xander.